District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
Hey, it's Bill from the Bill Simmons podcast. FIFA World Cup 26 fans, listen up. Is the official beer sponsor of the FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra is giving away $1 million worth of FIFA World Cup 26 tickets and prizes. Enter now at michelobultra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra FIFA World Cup 26 superior access. No purchase necessary. Open U.S. residents 21 plus begins on December 1st, 2025. Ends on July 31st, 2026. Multiple entry periods. Visit www.michelobultra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26 for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either going to be okay.
No, stop.
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I am your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. I have an update on the Antiquities Act, one of my favorite subjects to cover here on the program. For you in this episode today, we're not going according to our usual Monday or Tuesday posting schedule. This is more out of timeliness, but I will have a little bit of a update on this. It pertains to Grand Staircase Escalante and Bears Ears National Monuments, the back and forth over whether or not a president has powers to enhance, increase, or decrease monuments. And now there seems to be growing consensus that presidential authority does encompass them having the ability to shrink monuments. And there's even evidence from left of center outlets, Brookings Institution most notably, where that is also affirmed. And it wasn't just the Trump administration that did this, what some people might seem unprecedented move. There have been 4 or 5 other presidents who have taken similar steps to shrink monuments as well. So this is nothing out of the ordinary, but in the times we live in, people are very reactionary, so that's where we offer nuance. But before I dip into the Antiquities Act update, it's a federal court that has an update here. You will be seeing a lot from Washington, D.C. You're probably seeing social media brimming with this. I can tell you firsthand, America 250 celebrations in the nation's capital, however imperfect the coverage has been. I will tell you, having seen the flyover last night that kicked off the Great American State Fair, which I'm going to be checking out this weekend with friends, things are really exciting in Washington. Yes, there's more security, but there's a lot of exciting stuff happening to honor America's 250th semi-sesquicentennial birthday. So don't believe the detractors. It's still, America's birthday is still worth celebrating, but because the National Mall sits under the purview of National Park System, public lands, I was at a National Cattlemen's Beef Association and NSSF cookout in honor of America 250, Freedom 250 last night, and I got to catch a glimpse of the flyover. I only saw about 3 of the 5 demonstrations. Check out my Instagram account and you can see a portion of that there. It was super cool, amazing weather. We've had really low humidity, unlike Europe. I feel like we've traded with Europe weather-wise in terms of this week. It's been wonderful, low humidity, poor Europeans. Hopefully they start to take air conditioning, aircon very seriously, especially with these horrible heat waves that are taking place over there. So it's not Americans sticking it to you. It really is a necessity. And if it's not a necessity, it will be for many of those countries and individuals over there. But America 250 kickoff, it's great. The state fair looks incredible and interesting, and I'm looking forward to checking it out this weekend. And there will be more events leading up to America 250 that I'll try to chronicle here on the podcast. All right, so this updates the Antiquities Act. The Antiquities Act, if you need a refresher, I'll give you something in a minute or two. Breakdown in the next minute or so. It's a 1906 law, which was signed into law by President Roosevelt. Congress passed it. He made it official over 100 years ago. And the intention was good. It gives presidents the authority to, under Section 2, to designate national monuments from already existing public lands. So it can't be private lands to public lands. It already has to be under private or public management, to then become a national monument. But what is unclear right now, legally speaking, we might see clarity here with this recent update, is whether or not presidents not only can create and enhance outside of creation, but expand upon existing ones or shrink existing ones. That's always been a long-standing debate. But we're now starting to see bipartisan consensus that presidents can shrink national monuments. And I'm going to point to that Brookings Institution article that I like to cite whenever I talk about this issue. And I think it's extremely important. You've seen even center-right organizations usually are the ones that articulate that presidents have the authority to shrink it. This went originally to President Trump shrinking Bears Ears National Monument and Grand Staircase Escalante. Bears Ears was designated under Obama. Grand Staircase Escalante was from the Clinton era. And so he shrunk those monuments. He didn't eliminate them. He shrunk them. President Biden, when he took office, expanded Bears Ears from 400,000 acres to over 1.4 million acres, which is bigger than what Obama did. He did about 1 million acres. So this has created some sort of legal question about, okay, can presidents shrink monuments? Can they only expand? What can they do here? And so, yes, presidents do have control over here. It's a question of whether or not can they expand existing ones or can they shrink. Let me take you to this Brookings Institution, and I will link to a lot of stuff in the show notes for you if you are interested. And what the presidential authority, and even under Section 2 of the law, I don't want to forget this. So 1906, it's an old law. It needs some modernization, in my personal opinion. I think a lot of people agree with that too, that the designation for a national monument, in addition to being already held public lands, it must be confined to the smallest area compatible with proper care and management of the objects to be protected for historical, cultural, or scientific purposes. So a lot of critics of these wide-sweeping monument designations argue that a lot of these areas are not protecting historical, cultural, or scientific items with the context of antiquities. I went to Bears Ears National Monument myself. I saw it. I think it should exist. I think the smaller version of it was acceptable. But when Biden enlarged it, he also restricted recreational shooting on all that 1.4 million acres, which is, okay, if we concede that we have to accept the enlargement, there's nothing we can do, might as well open it up to more opportunities. No, of course, they shut it down to various recreational opportunities there. There is legal precedence for higher courts, especially SCOTUS, to weigh in on this, that Chief Justice Roberts warned in 2021 relating to national marine sanctuaries, federal waters, that a challenge to the Antiquities Act, quote, may warrant consideration, especially given the myriad restrictions on public use this purely discretionary designation can serve to justify. The two states where there is limited authority where the president can designate this would be exceptions like Alaska and Wyoming, which are already largely public land states. Congress, I think, has to weigh in on this. Like, it's ultimately Congress that should kind of control and keep the president's power in check as to what they can and cannot do. And you need to have buy-in from the community. You need to have, I think, state approval before a new national monument is created. Because I think the way that we've seen the left or Democratic administrations do this is they want national monuments which restrict access to hunting, fishing, because oftentimes, sadly, national monuments do not regard those as scientific activities. So you don't see oftentimes with expansions reverence and respect for hunting and fishing as management tools. So this is part of the other whole host of other issues that Congress needs to tackle, in my opinion. And so a lot of the sportsmen's groups want to see reforms here too. I'm not just talking out of thin air. I also want to mention the Brookings Institution. I think it's important to mention that as well before I go into the update here. But they have said that there is an ability for presidents to have the power to shrink national monuments. So this is 2017. Brookings Institution, center left, left of center, think tank, think Heritage Foundation, but on the left. President Trump has the power to shrink national monuments. Who else? And again, this goes back to the two monuments in question that relates to this decision this week. Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante. Now, who had previously diminished national monuments in this fashion? It was President Trump wasn't the only one. The 1973 seminal law, FLPMA, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, limits the president as it engages diminishment directly, noting limitations on the Secretary of Interior to modify existing protected areas. That's what they say. But what the law's text does not and does say, The second part of that grant could easily be interpreted to imply the power to diminish the limits in which, in all cases, shall be confined to the smallest area compatible and proper care and management, Section 2, which I mentioned, of the objects to be protected. Here, a president is charged to make this area as small as is needed. Courts have ruled several cases involving the Antiquities Act without once challenging the president's discretion on the grounds of the size of the monument, even as cases dealt with some of the nation's largest monuments. So is President Trump the first diminisher-in-chief? Brookings Institution had asked at the time. No. He was the 20th president since the Antiquities Act was passed. There were others, and how you can find this. Presidents Eisenhower, Truman, Taft, Wilson, and Coolidge. So that's a split between Republicans and Democrats. I think it's mostly Eisenhower was a Republican, Truman was a Democrat, Taft was a Republican, Wilson was a Democrat, Coolidge a Republican. So they note and they link to an AEI paper on the Antiquities Act and diminishment from John Yoo and Todd Gazzino about how these 5 presidents, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, a good mix of Democrat and Republican presidents besides President Trump had engaged in diminishment of Antiquities Act or national monuments. So he's not the first one. So of course people have very short-term memories or they don't look for precedents. And they're like, well, this is the worst thing to happen. And actually, no, this is not the only time this has occurred. And as I've mentioned repeatedly on the show, that diminishment is not a cause for concern, especially if hunting, fishing, recreation opportunities are not respected or considered to be a legitimate use on a national monument. A national monument is not yet a national park. I really hate how, and this is not to diminish national parks. I love the national parks. I have been an early supporter of, I've been a long-time supporter of national parks. It's one of the few places early in my life that I went to with my parents. So of course I respect it. I love it. I've had great memories going to national parks as a kid, teenager, and now as an adult. And there's value there. There are 63 official national parks. But does every public land area need to be a national park? No. I think it diminishes what a national park is. If you have everything set out to be a national park, to me, I look at it more in a sinister way that if you designate everything a national park, you want to impose restrictions on access. And the national park system, particularly the 63 official parks, are facing deferred maintenance backlog issues. They're facing more crowds. They don't have the updated infrastructure. There's an issue of funding and budgeting. And there have been attempts to restrict access with timed entry fees. There's debate over whether or not that's effective with crowd control, or enhancing access or speeding up access there for very popular sites and destinations within national parks. I have mixed opinions about that myself. It does save a little bit of time at some of the parks. It does not save time at others. I don't know if it's known to necessarily reduce crowds, but I don't also like the attempt to reduce crowds as we've seen. The park should be open to everyone. People have to be respectful of the parks and know the rules when they're there, not get close to animals, don't touch certain things, and stay on the paths. But this brings me to a quick wraparound of why this has been boiling up. And again, this is like NEPA. This is like many, many laws that are needing to be brought into the 21st century, the ESA. So many laws that are due for modernization because we have different challenges. There are different situations now in 2026 compared to, let's say, 50 years ago with the ESA, 100 plus years ago with the Antiquities Act. So Congress needs to come in and say and clarify the presidential power, since this is under their purview to do that. But where did this recent update stem from? So again, the 2 national monuments in Utah, one from Obama's time, one from Bill Clinton's time. And it says from Bloomberg Law, monuments created under the Antiquities Act are subject to judicial review. An appeals court ruled Tuesday, allowing Utah's challenge to Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments to proceed. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit vacated a district court's 2023 ruling that Antiquities Act cases aren't subject to judicial review, and a panel remanded the merits of the challenge back to the district court. The ruling will determine the route Utah and other western states may take in challenging large monuments designated by presidents. The decision comes as the Trump administration seeks to open up more public lands to energy production and more. So here are what some preservationist groups say. Earth Justice, not happy, of course. In their press release, they write their dismay, saying that The lawsuit from the state of Utah, which attacks Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monuments and the Antiquities Act itself, will now be remanded to the district court for review. The monuments remain fully valid and protected and will continue to be as the case proceeds. The court also rejected arguments from monument foes who were hoping to fast-track the case to the Supreme Court that the 10th Circuit should pass judgment on the validity of monuments themselves, even though the issue was not before the court. And their managing attorney says, court after court has affirmed the president's authority under the Antiquities Act to create monuments on federal lands. The Bedrock Law has helped to protect lands and waters that in some cases became beloved national parks like the Grand Canyon, Olympic, Zion, and Grand Teton. La, 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 la. Now, if you want to get an insider's view into Bears Ears, for instance, I went there and I spoke to some of the commissioners and other stakeholders in that area. And they had told me they had relented a little bit their opposition and that commissioner's no longer there. And he later on had some controversial family stuff happening. So it's been a couple years since I spoke to folks in Bears Ears, but we did a report there. I'm going to link it to the show notes. And you could see for yourself, there was not signage at the time. It wasn't very organized. And like I've said, more contemporarily or more recently, you saw that recreational shooting was not regarded as a use there. And that's a travesty. People are responsible and aren't going to leave any shells. And people out west like public target shooting ranges. And I think they were probably in the process of constructing some because in those hard to reach western areas, rural areas, like the only place people can go recreationally shooting is on public lands. Colorado and other western states have started to construct public target shooting ranges there. You pay a little nominal fee and you can go shoot there, no problem, because an indoor private range, they're great. They're properly ventilated with AC, especially if it's a grueling summer, but they get crowded and they can be very cost prohibitive. So a lot of the times these public target shooting ranges, which are covered under Pittman-Robertson and go back to that, they offer a benefit for people who like outdoor shooting or can't afford to shoot at a very ritzy public indoor range. So the fact that the Biden admin restricted it on that enlarged monument, not surprising, but also to me deleterious to the public land multiple use management ethos, where you also have to respect recreation, not just hiking or some of those others. But other hunting, fishing also have to, like I said, have to be recognized as a management tool, and they should be. But we see that under Dem administrations, they're not. Unfortunately, Biden was starting to move away from that standard. But that's kind of a crash course as to what is happening. So Earth Justice claims this is not going to go to the Supreme Court, but I think the Supreme Court is overdue to hear a case on this. Not this year, maybe not this session, because they're rounding out the session now. We saw a Second Amendment case, which I think I will go into sometime soon. It just was issued today about Hawaii and how you can, Hawaii law, which violates the Second and 14th Amendment about carrying outside of your house. So I'm going to try to get some experts on because that is a big, big move. We have been waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on Second Amendment cases for the longest time. So it seems to be that they are now. But will we see something with public lands issues and more energy and climate challenges? Definitely. I think, like I said, Chief Justice Roberts had as an appetite for hearing a similar case. They reviewed a national monument with respect to that. And it's long overdue, I think, for if Congress does not tackle this, and it seems like Congress is going to be in gridlock. They're not in session for another few weeks, Senate side, where a lot of these reforms can happen. But we haven't seen an outright Antiquities Act reform bill passing in Congress. We've seen them introduced. They're talked about. They're inserted into greater lands packages, but they have not been cleared in either chamber, the House or the Senate, unfortunately, because it's not sexy enough to talk about, or it's not an appropriations bill. It's not reauthorizing funding. So I'm hoping in the future that there will be seriousness attached to this. There have been attempts in 2017. In first Trump administration, we did see some dabbling here, but we have not seen an overt effort. And I hope we do now in a post-Loper Bright world where agencies have less authority to create rules, and now Congress has to do their traditional duties to reform laws. It can't just be the executive or the executive branch, rather, or regulatory agencies, cabinets, secretaries doing this crafting rules. It has to be Congress. The Antiquities Act was passed by Congress. So they need to do something here. And there are, again, different checks and balances and different caveats and conditions for creation of new monuments. And I think we do need to see that because wide sweeping monument designations do not respect a lot of conservation practices, including hunting and fishing as a management tool. As we see specific to Bears Ears and Grand Staircase, Escalante, especially at Bears Ears, recreational shooting is not respected and allowed. So why have that other than to make it very restrictive? The time is now for Congress to modernize the Antiquities Act. I don't see that happening. We don't even have permitting reform or forest management, updated forest management from the Senate, because that is where action needs to happen. And if we see that happen, cross the Rubicon, we could see the Antiquities Act get some modernization or a second look. But the time is now. And if we don't see something like this now, I think it's going to be kicked down the road. They're going to kick the can on this issue, and probably it won't be until a couple years where we'll see some serious tackling of this, because Democrats, the current slate of Democrats there are in Congress, will never pass an Antiquities Act reform bill. Maybe some Western ones, if they get some wins and objective, whatever buy-ins with that to ensure that their interests are represented. But if it's a preservationist lawmaker on the left, I don't see them supporting Antiquities Act reforms unless they get some sort of agreement with Republicans. But in the past, you would see bipartisan support here. Now you don't, because even Western Democrats are not as conservationist minded. They're more preservationist, which is very sad. It shouldn't be the case. It should be a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue, conservation. But people have different meaning and understanding of conservation. Some think it's the proper meaning, traditional meaning of wise use of natural resources. Others think it's no touch. All human impact is bad. Is there a balance between the two? I think that a balance between the two can be struck. That's what conservation is. It doesn't mean you overdevelopment, but doesn't mean you say no to some smart development here and there. With America 250, we should appreciate our crown jewels through public lands, the various national parks, nature in general, because we don't want to just develop and build and not have anything to look at and admire. Plus, green spaces are great for your health. Being by the water has manifold health benefits. So we want to have nature, and you can have nature through true conservation practices. That's always been the crux of this show and what we argue here. But let's get some Antiquities Act reform, maybe in the spirit of America 250. The likelihood slim, but I'm trying to be an optimist here, and I hope with this case, maybe we will see the Supreme Court take up something like this in the next session as they start to go into summer recess. So that is what I have to say on this case from the lower courts. If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.